Motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Entertain a motion to go into executive session
Make a motion to go into executive session.
for the purpose of discussing personnel.
For the purpose of discussing personnel. and eating.
I will second
It's a
that.
group effort. You got second, Steve?
I'll second that.
All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Lohr?
Yes.
Keller?
Yes.
Dahl?
Yes.
Clendenin?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Stricker?
Yes.
All right, we are now in executive session. Welcome, everyone.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, we have our first opportunity for public comments. The board welcomes comments, questions, ideas from persons in attendance. Members of the audience may comment during the public comment portion of the meeting when recognized by the board president. Please note that the board does not respond to public comments during its meetings. We ask that comments be limited to 3 minutes in order to complete the agenda within a reasonable time. We also ask that comments begin by providing your name and address and the school district in which you reside. Would anyone like to make a public comment at this time? All right. All right, next up we have celebrations from student advisors.
I do not have any at this time.
Thank you. Celebrations from board members. Let's start with Dr. Stricker.
Congratulations to the music students who received some high honors at district in band and orchestra and choir, and also to congratulations to Coach Blossom for a wonderful career as basketball coach, and kudos to him for wanting to spend some time to watch his daughter play collegiate sports.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Ditto, congratulating Coach Blossom. I got to go read to and attend to some questions from kindergartners at Avery, including how old are you? It was actually really fun. I enjoyed it a lot. We did Passion Day at Steger/Givens this past Friday. I brought the news crew, and it was awesome to, anytime the camera was on, the kids were just, to the point where even selfies, they were going, yeah. And so that was awesome. Just a reminder that because of weather, Steger/Givens Black History Month program will be March 27th from 5 to 6:30 this month.
5 to 6:30.
Yes.
Thank you.
Steve?
A couple things. One I just completely drew a blank on. Oh, now I remember. I had the pleasure of wearing kind of both hats as both a Webster Groves High School graduate and as a board member in participating in the review of the nominations for the Webster Groves High School Wall of Fame. It is every other year that the Wall of Fame does its nomination process, and then on the intervening other years, the Sports Hall of Fame does theirs, but this was a year for the Wall of Fame. And I would encourage all of the students, especially when you get an opportunity to take a look at some of the plaques that are on the wall outside of Knight Auditorium. There will be probably, I believe it's 10 or 11 new plaques going up this fall. There are some amazing people that have gone to the same institution that you and I attended, and that we represent and serve as part of our district. It was an amazing process. Even the folks who did not make the cut this time around have done some amazing things, and these are accomplishments both from Webster Groves High School, but we also had some Douglas nominees as well. Every other year, I've actually been involved now for the last 3 or 4, and I'm just blown away by the number of accomplishments that these people have done, not only nationally recognized in their fields, but in many cases internationally recognized as leaders in their fields. So again, I encourage all community members that when they're outside of Knight Auditorium to take a gander up on the Wall of Fame. The other thing was that for, I guess it was the third year in a row, I was part of the Ed Plus new board candidate information panel, where I believe there was about 20 or so board candidates from around the districts that Ed Plus serves, and they got an opportunity to ask a lot of questions about board service, got a lot of wide eyes. I know our incoming board member, Alex, yep, there he is. Alex was there as well. Even though he's not having to campaign, it was great to see him there participating and asking good questions. So the districts around our area are very well represented with some very good potential folks.
Great, thank you for doing that.
I know that it's conferences time around the district, so I just wanted to give a shout out to teachers who are working hard around the district. Also, a couple of weeks ago, I volunteered, and I think I figured it out. It might have been around 12 hours for a trivia night at Edgar Road School, and I wanted to give a huge shout out to Stephanie Colson and her husband who helped manage that whole event, but really to all the PTO parents who get pulled into the trivia nights and the auctions, because it's just a huge event, amazing night of fun and philanthropy for kids and teachers in our schools, so huge out there. But also, in terms of the meeting that I went to last Friday, John, with the legislative advocacy, I think Gina Mitten was there this time, Sarah Unsicker's been there in the past. There are a couple of bad bills out there right now, so hopefully we're all calling to get some good laws out here in Missouri for public schools.
Some bills, to clarify, some bills that are not friendly to public education.
Thank you, yes.
Amen and ladies did the ACA tour again this year, which was a big success from what I hear. They took the ACA bus and had an ACA lunch. That's a lot of ACA. And then I had the great privilege of going to see these lovely ladies here swim at the state meet, which was awesome. And some unbelievable swims. And at one point we were winning. We got third, which is still unbelievable for Webster. So awesome to see that. And I hope that we will get I'm going to say this every board meeting from here till forever. I hope that we will get a board of the high school with all the records. And also I hope that we do a better job of recognizing them. They won conference for the first time in school history and didn't make the daily announcements. That's not okay. And maybe wrestling doesn't get that either, I don't know. Probably not, because you're not boys soccer or boys basketball, sorry.
All right then, Ms. Dahl. Administrators?
Kathy?
Yes, I have one. Social science teacher Chantel Mason and some of her students were interviewed today by Red Hat Incorporated representatives for a documentary on open source in agriculture. The students explained an aquaponics program that they've been working on this semester.
I had a few too before we get to our special guests. First of all, kudos to the Webster Grove School District Foundation. The foundation has volunteers that dedicate a lot of time and energy to raising funds for innovative grants in our schools that affect our children and their learning. This year they doled out about $37,000 in grants were awarded, but we had our foundation Mardi Gras event, and the acapella ladies were there performing along with a jazz ensemble. So kudos to the students that were there as well as that fundraising group. Also wanted to recognize last week at the Webster Groves High School was the All Right event, which is a huge event. It takes an extraordinary amount of time and fundraising. It's put on by the English department. It involves the FACS department. It involves the art department, administrators, a lot of people in the school. And we bring in different writers and spoken word poets from all around the country. We have our students that perform poetry slams. The drama department did A Midsummer Night's Dream. Just a lot of different opportunities for kids to come and learn from other people on some pretty important topics too, I would say. So major kudos to the teachers and the student leaders who are part of that group. Also wanted to recognize there's been a tremendous amount of work at our schools. We believe that Black History is not something that's just done in February, but we also do celebrate Black History in February, and there were a lot of our schools, all of our schools, that celebrated that in pretty unique and personal ways. A lot of them bringing in people, organizations, individuals from the community, both within our district boundaries as well as regionally, to showcase different talents, skills, or possibilities for our children. And it was a really neat time. I had a great chance this past weekend to speak with two of our administrators, Dr. Fields and Dr. Lee at Emmanuel Episcopal Church, talking about different things that we were doing as a school system, as well as really focusing on Steger and Hickson around the whole topic of equity. And so Howard and Grace did a great job with that. So now we wanted to get to our special guests. We had two teams that recently had their state meet a few weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. First wanted to recognize our wrestlers. We had 3 students that qualified for the state tournament: Charlie Getz, Eric Pettibone, and Hannah Jansen. Hannah's unable to be here tonight, but we do have Eric and Charlie. And just wanted to acknowledge you and all the effort that goes into it. I know I was never a wrestler. My best friend was a wrestler. He always beat me up, you know, playing in the basement and stuff like that as a kid. But one thing that I know is that the amount of work that goes into wrestling is pretty extraordinary. And it takes a lot of perseverance, a lot of grit, and you guys certainly exemplify that, and we're happy you're here. And what I'd like to do is give your coach an opportunity to say a few words, and then maybe hear from you guys.
Because he's such a man of many words.
And then I'd like to hear from you guys about what do you see as a highlight of the year, and what are you thinking about next year? Any plans for next year? What you're thinking about? So,
Should I stand?
Please.
Okay. My name is James LeMay. I've been the head wrestling coach here at Webster Groves for the last 10 years. The 2 young men in front of you and the young lady that's not able to be here were really great athletes for me, but they really exemplified what we try to do with the wrestling program, which is build character and do a lot of the things that as students and athletes to do the right thing. These 2 young men were both state qualifiers last year as well. Eric was fortunate enough to place 6th this year and bring home some hardware for his efforts. Charlie didn't quite get to that level. And Hannah tied for 5th because of the way they have the new girls system. They didn't medal out beyond 4th place. That's going to change in the future. But she definitely would have been the 5th place medalist because the girl she tied with, she beat. These 2 young men, I can speak to them, to their ability, and they're 2 seniors that I'm truly going to miss. They were leaders for me in the off season. They've been leaders since they were freshmen, and they really are just a great example of what Webster Groves students can be. And I'm very proud as a coach to be here to represent them and to have them represent me and what we do here at Webster Groves. And so I just wanted to thank you all for this recognition.
yeah. Would you guys mind just sharing any highlight of the year and next year? Any thoughts on next year? Sure, Charlie, please. And introduce any family members or friends here with you.
This is my mom, Jennifer, and my dad, Pat. They've been to every single wrestling meet, since I was a freshman, which is... And I'm just really, really grateful that I happen to be on a team with a coach who has the ability to create a family like you hear about in novels, where everyone's brought together as a group, and I feel really, really lucky to have been a part of something like that. So,
Really nice.
Very good.
I'm Eric. I'm here with my sister Lila, my grandparents Izzy, and my mom. They too have been to, same thing. So I'm just so proud of being a part of a team with I get a coach like LeMay, who just took me under his wing right away. Just the whole family aspect of wrestling is the biggest thing. That's how you get through the grit and the heart of it is just like you do with your brothers and your sisters, and it's it makes it a lot easier.
That's awesome. Congratulations again to you all and those folks that aren't here, because your entire family's not here. We know you got a big, robust wrestling family, really close to one another, and it's a celebration for all of us.
John, can I ask you one quick question? Okay, Curahee.
Correct.
Curahee.
Yes, sir.
Could you elaborate on what that means?
Yes, sir.
I see that on Facebook and everything, and I didn't wrestle in high school. I had a lot of friends who did. Please, help me.
I'm also a history teacher, and Curahee is from the 101st Airborne during World War II. And the 101st Airborne, when they trained at Camp Toccoa, they had to climb up this mountain, basically run up a mountain 3 miles up, 3 miles down, and the name of the mountain was Curahee.
Okay.
The Curahee Mountain means stands alone in Cherokee, and the 101st Airborne took that name and augmented it so that it means stands alone together. And so when I became the wrestling coach, that became the motto that I tried to instill in the team, that idea that even though we're out there by ourselves during meets, we're together. And when we practice, when we train, when we work, everything we do it together.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation. Appreciate that.
And we also really wanted to recognize Hannah. Hannah, who's not here, this was the first year for girls competing at the state meet. We're all about tradition and legacy and stuff like that, and she will go down as the first female wrestling qualifier, as well as placing at state. So huge kudos to Hannah. Sorry she can't be here. Speaking of going down and Webster Grove's lore and stuff, Ms. Dow referenced earlier our girls' state swimming. I have a little bit of context for swimming. I grew up as a swimmer. I burned out on it very early because of the work and going back and forth and pushing off walls at odd hours and stuff like that. And I also coached at the high school level as well as some other different. So I have context for how difficult it is to be a swimmer, and certainly have context, having coached, how difficult it is to have the accolades and achievements that you guys did this year are remarkable, both as individuals, both on relay teams, and as a collective team. Your coach, just so you know, and I won't get a chance to read them, just kind of sent me even a reminder of all of the performance accolades, the first place finishes, second place finishes at invitationals, your individual performances. This team was the first team in our district, our state's history, our school district's history to be conference champions. They're the first team in our school's history to get third place at the state tournament. I believe it was 17 of the young ladies medaled in events. A lot of kids were swimming in both heats, both the championship consolation heats. And again, like Ms. Dow said, it was just this unifying team. It was beautiful to watch you all at the state championship and just seeing you rallying around one another. And as a school system, we can't be more proud of you. We will certainly work on the record board. Ms. Dow will remind us of that. But
Weekly.
wanted to give Coach Broshiers the opportunity also to talk on these young ladies. And then again, similar to the young men, give you an opportunity to list maybe a highlight and recognize those in the attendance here who supported you.
My name is Dan Broshiers. I've been coaching the high school kids. This is my 22nd season. And it's a fantastic group. We went 9-1 in our dual meet record, which is the best finish we've ever had. Dual meets, we came in second, and a couple of invitationals behind the bigger class schools were the only two, that we came in second. We won an invitational, beating a couple of different bigger class schools, which was nice. And again, we won our conference championship for the first time in school history for the girls, which was really awesome. It was during one of the snow days, so everything got kind of shifted around, and it was a late night, and all the girls stayed to watch diving, so we could win that together with the divers and all celebrate together. We didn't get back to school until midnight that night, so it was a really late night, but it was very fun, and the girls did a great job representing the school district, and the community as a whole. And that's kind of the key with these girls. They do a lot of great things in the pool, but outside the pool, we get lots of compliments everywhere we go about how polite they are. That night, for instance, they cleaned up a big, huge mess, and the janitors at the school we're at, they're like, I can't believe your girls cleaned up all their stuff by themselves. And, just that kind of little thing and attention to detail that really brings this group together. At the state meet, we had a swimmer in every event for the first time, and a diver, so all the events were covered. We were the only team to have 3 people back in one event in 100 freestyle. Everybody else made it back, which was pretty awesome. One of them taking home a medal, and that was exciting too. Most points we've ever scored. Again, we finished in 3rd place. We're only 2 or 3 points behind 2nd, so it was pretty exciting coming right down to the end. Another great thing, I didn't know Miss Bell was there, so that's really exciting. I subscribed to Misha broadcast, so I watched it, because that way I love to watch swimming. And the commentators kept talking about the Webster crowd and how loud they were. It was very exciting being down on the pool deck, and all the support from the community and students and faculty and the administration and stuff. So it was really nice. But yeah, it was a great year, and we only graduated 2 of those girls, so we'll try to do it again next year.
Awesome. I know some of you aren't making eye contact with me. But we would really just love to hear a few words. Was there a highlight from this year? Anything that you can say? And then also acknowledge the folks in the room who are providing that support and care for you along the way.
Come on, man.
Okay. So I'm Ellen Collier. I'm a sophomore, and this is my 2nd year on the team. And I think like a really big highlight for this year was definitely winning our first conference champs. And it was just so awesome from just going up from last year and having such a great team. Even though it was such a long night and we stayed there all the way until midnight, it was so worth it just getting that trophy and like knowing that we made history. And I also think it's really great that we beat like Ladue in our dual meets, our #1 competitors. Even though we didn't win against them in state, it was still a really big deal to race them one-on-one at our home pool and still beat them. And then, and I also would like to thank like all the new freshmen like Chloe and Reed and some of the other ones who couldn't make it tonight, but they really helped our team improve a lot from last year. So.
Awesome. Any special loved ones here with you tonight?
My mom.
Hi, Mom. Next.
I'm Chloe. I'm a freshman. I enjoyed like every single meet there was. Like I just had fun on the team. Like it was just like I didn't expect to have that much fun. Like it was such a good environment. Like not saying I didn't expect it.
Since you have 3 more years, 3 more Coach Bruce years, right?
No, like it was just a great like environment. Like every single girl is friends. Like no one is left out, and it's just a great experience to have all of them together and win.
Awesome. Congrats. Chloe, you want to introduce anybody here?
This is my dad.
Hi, Dad.
Alright, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm a junior, and this is my mom.
Hi, Mom.
I don't know, this team is just, it's so special because like, we just have such a like huge team bond, and like along with that, like we compete with each other, like not only in meets but in practices, and that like really like helps our team like improve like as a whole. And yeah, I don't know, we did really well like in all of our meets, and I was really proud of that. And he was such a great coach like throughout the whole season, and he pushed us to like be our best. And yeah.
Congrats.
Hi, I'm Lee Brown. I'm a freshman. This is my dad. This is just such a great experience. Being the first year on the team, everyone was so welcoming. Coach B, the way he kept us going, and all the meets were great. Conference, first time winning, and then getting here at state was really special.
Well, thanks again to the coaches, thanks again to the student athletes and the parents. I think we can, the skills, the habits that you're learning now will affect you the rest of your life. I always tell people that for me personally, I was an athlete in high school. I stopped it there. but I learned more about leadership from coaches and from competition than I ever learned in a classroom. I learned a lot more about leadership in there, and so you're learning those skills now that will transfer and serve you really well in your pursuits academically as well as in all aspects of your life. So, way to go.
Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. You are welcome to stay and attend the rest of tonight's Board of Education meeting. However, if you have other things that you would like to do, such as homework or exercise or whatever, you are welcome to depart. Swim, practice, wrestle.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Good seeing you all.
All right, you will have in your packet a set of policies for first read. Any questions about them? I don't think there was anything terribly exciting about any of them. They were MSBA revisions. If you do have questions, Keita, Joe, and me are all on the policy committee. You're welcome to ask. We'll have a couple more opportunities to see them before we through them. And then board calendar is also in the agenda for your review. John, is there anything we need to?
No, I would say if you get an opportunity, we almost have everybody completed the self-eval. So if you haven't done that yet, just give that a go. But that's really it. Nothing else.
You mean I wasn't the straggler?
I'm always.
Yes, I thought I was the last one.
Okay, correspondence log has been updated if you'd like to take a look at that. And then next up, we have staff recognition.
Yeah, Dr. Wiley was just going to touch on that real quick, the staff recognition event.
Sure. In your materials, at the very end of the communications, I added the staff recognition list for this year that shows who those retirees are, as well as the years of service. We did just get a retirement today, so I will update that and provide you a new one. So we will be in the high school in the cafeteria on that May 14th. That's a Tuesday. We are hoping to have a little bit something different this year, video for our retirees that kind of shows kind of some pictures of them, a little personal touch for our retirees, as well as the picture booth will be there. Anyone is welcome to take pictures. It's absolutely free. If you want to do a single photo or a group photo, that's absolutely free to you. So we're hoping to keep the same process as we did last year, where the people that are being recognized will come in and sign in so that we know who's present and we're not just kind of calling off those names. And so when you guys go up, in order to call people at the different years of service, you'll have those cards in front of you, and that'll be the people that are actually present. And we'll present those to them. If they're absent, we make a personal appearance at their location to give them their note and thank you from the district. The video that we're trying to do for retirees, we're hoping to show that right before each retiree's name is called. And so embedded in there will be that synopsis that you guys used to read. It should be embedded in the video. And so once the video was over, maybe a minute or so, call that person's name, they come on up, and so they move on from there. So I'll have more information as we go. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. But at the high school, we're starting officially at 4. I think we put 3:45 on there. You guys want to come, and we'll have information. If you notice on the list someone in particular that you would like to call his or her name, just send me an email, and we'll make sure we put your name next to that group so that you can call that name. Any questions about the event?
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
All right, reports from the superintendent and staff.
Dr. Irvin and Mr. Thomas.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to lead off for Dr. Irvin and Dr. Yeagans. So if you recall at our last meeting when I spoke about attendance, one of the things I had shared as a strategy to help improve attendance was rethinking our alternative education offerings. And so tonight we're here to share with you that work that we've been doing. And this conversation started off pretty early in the school year. In the fall, Dr. Irvin and Dr. Yeagans and I got together to kind of rethink how we could meet the needs of all of our students who for whatever reason just need an alternative form to receive their learning. So this included some of the programs that had already existed and were going on at the high school, like the Statesman Center, but also Vista, the alternative school we participate with the Kirkwood School District in. So we had several conversations, just reimagining what we could do, knowing that it could potentially impact Vista. We also had conversations with the Kirkwood School District, several conversations with the Kirkwood School District, so that we were transparent with them in terms of our intentions. And also realizing that a number of the students that were going to Vista were there for alternative reasons, not for long-term suspension. Our numbers of long-term suspension have really declined. So there were really just less than a handful of kids who were there for suspension reasons. So you may have seen in the Webster Kirkwood Times the article last week where Kirkwood is bringing Vista to Kirkwood High School, which is a great opportunity for their students. And we're building an alternative program at Webster Groves High School that we think will be a wonderful learning experience for our kids. And more importantly, meeting the needs that they have, the unique needs that they have. So Vista will not be continuing. We will not be partnering with Kirkwood on that. It's been a wonderful partnership for over 15 years, and we thank them for everything that they've done with us and our students and that partnership. So Dr. Irvin and Dr. Yeagans are here to explain a little bit more of the details of our thinking with the alternative programming at Webster Groves High School.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Appreciate your starting us off. What I kind of want to start with a little bit of where we are today and where we've been historically. We have really two settings that I would say support alternative learning perhaps, and one is Vista, is mentioned by Mr. Thomas, and that right now we pay for seats in that setting, and we use staffing that's hired by Kirkwood. They have an administrator there, they have a social worker, an SSD teacher, as well as I believe 4 other full-time teachers in that setting right now, and that's again Kirkwood staffing. We also have something that's called the Statesman Center. We have 62 students in that place now, and that's a kind of web-based instructions through Odysseyware for students that have struggled in classroom settings. It's more self-paced, and we have teachers that push into that setting. So a teacher who may have one of their classroom responsibilities may be Statesman Center, as the same as it may be to teach Algebra 2 or government. And they are support varying subjects that students are learning in those settings for each of the 7 hours throughout the school day. So one of the things we talk about are goals, and we've visited several other schools, Dr. Yeagans and I, to look at what we think the best answer might be for our students here at Webster Groves. And one of them is really thinking about creating personalized blended learning that really, with smaller class sizes, being more flexible, more driven by the individual students' interests and needs and supports they may need, as well as varied learning methods, and doing some project-based, problem-based learning rather than some virtual learning. So some of it would be, as we currently envision it, some web-based work that would be self-paced, and it would be supported through some more higher level, more complex work that would require some of the 21st century skills or future-ready skills we talk about that we want all our students to have the opportunity to engage in. Some of the supports we would hope to add to that setting that are currently not part of our program is some social emotional supports, and we've already begun conversations with Webster University to provide interns, to provide either a group or individual counseling and therapeutic counseling for students as needed in that setting. And we've also talked about how we can move around some of our current counseling staff perhaps to serve students in that setting, because each week we have a student concerns meeting with our administrative team and SSD, and we will many times come from problems that students are currently exhibiting that we are unable to address fully in our larger setting, that a smaller, more personalized setting that would be more supportive of individual student needs in a smaller setting. I previously worked in Lindbergh with the academy. There was about 75 students, and we found that the smaller, less transition, more individualized work, students seem to respond to that more often than being in a classroom of 24 or 25 other students, both to their individual needs as students, as learners, and also the social emotional components as well. Thinking about short-term and long-term suspensions, we are hoping to students who are out right now or out of school, and we don't have a support system for those students who are who are suspended, and hoping to perhaps have those students come and be a part of that school setting, almost like an in-school suspension to support kids, because right now we're relying on their work, and some of the research I've seen in our school even talks about students who are suspended likely to be not being successful in the classroom setting. So in order to better support students learning when they're out for an extended period of time, possibly having them come into that setting and being supported. In Lindbergh, we had about 90% of our kids who were on long-term suspension were involved in a program where they were being able to come in for part of the school day and get support for their learning. So those are the other pieces, and also Missouri Options having to have an answer for that there for students who need that option to successfully complete high school.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
So kids who are long-term suspended now don't go to Vista?
And it's greater than 10 days, they would go to Vista.
They would go to Vista?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought.
If we have room. We do have limited seats at Vista, so if we were to go over that, then we would not have room for all our students in that case.
So you're saying this provides greater opportunity to serve more kids?
Yes. So if a student's out for a 5-day or a little bit more suspension, which we have some of those at times, that would be a place they can come in and get support during that time period in an alternative setting. Staffing needs, we certainly see a need for someone to be a coordinator for that site that would help drive the work and connect all the adults that are coming into that place to make sure we're meeting our students' needs. So that's certainly a position we think we need, as well as support staff and SSD staff. We've already had a conversation with SSD about making sure we support students who need that in an alternative school setting, and then push in staffing we currently use. We're unsure right now how many we would need based on how many number of students would continue from Vista into that setting. So that's a little bit of an unknown at this point. This is from the Alternative Education Association, just thinking about teachers who are in that place. We want to make sure we have people that have chosen to be in that setting, people that have a heart for that work. We want to make it people who see that the purpose and the ability for that setting. It's very important, I think, to have those folks in that place. And one thing we'll talk about today is some professional development we think that might be particularly needed for those teachers in that setting. And then the social work interns as well will be part of that staffing.
So, proposed schedule. We've had a lot of conversations around what's best for students. The schedule that you see in front of you that we have proposed right now is actually the schedule that Vista runs by. So we're not necessarily saying this is the schedule, but if we mirror Vista, these are the 2 times that students attend Vista when they are away from our school. Along with this proposed schedule, obviously the last session is at 2:30. We would also hold credit recovery in this space as well. We currently have credit recovery Monday through Thursday after school in the Statesman Center space. It runs from 2:45 p.m. until 5 o'clock p.m. So again, this space will hold credit recovery for our students as well. So, as we think about what students we would invite into this space, students that are struggling in the general education setting, so what does that look like? We have a meeting every Tuesday morning with Dr. Irvin and the administrative staff, and we kind of talk about, okay, do we have students in our offices that we need assistance with? Whether it's a student that has been hospitalized, or we're trying to figure out how to transition that student back into the setting. We have students that have emotional issues, mental health issues, attendance issues. For whatever reason, this student isn't meeting the traditional model, right? They can't get up every day, come to school at 7:50, leave at 2:35, just like what we consider traditional students. Also, the students that are currently at Vista, if Vista were to still be in existence, some of those students we would recommend just for mental health, anxiety reasons. They go over, it's a half a day, it's flexible, they excel. Maybe that's a great place for you to be, but unfortunately, since we don't necessarily have that, we are looking at, okay, so the students that are at Vista, who needs to be a part of the setting? So some of those students will automatically be a part of the setting, and then some students will be new students that are invited into the setting. Statesman Center, as we know it now, on the second floor, if you are familiar with that, near the Chelsea Center, that will move over to the new space. And this is the new space. A long time ago, it was our drama area.
So it's been drama, it's also been an academic lab area for classes, and most recently it's been where our cheerleaders practice and make pyramids, things of that nature for Turkey Day. That's a lot of work. And there's a separate entrance below, a single door that we will also utilize as we have that, we have students going in and out.
So this is how we envision using the space. You can see the layout drawn in the schematic there on the right as you're facing the screen, which is that second floor. You've got office space in these two spots here that are currently used as storage. And then this is a room now that would be, we think, where the Statesman Center would reside. And then this is where we think the alternative school setting would end up. You can see kind of what we envision kind of the use of the space and creating kind of a studio environment there for our students that would be in there. And just we want to make sure this is not a replica of every other classroom here in our building. If students have struggled in that setting, we want to make sure it looks a little different, has a little, and it responds to their needs as well. So that's where we see the again that space there, like a computer lab, space within the studio setting for room 2. Some of the things we have on our list to kind of continue on is getting the staffing and coordinator positions in place, and then thinking about the intake and exit process. So when we found out this was going to be our current alternative school setting was going to dissolve, we went over to Vista and met with students, let them know that from us, and that we're putting a plan in place for them to be able to come back in some ways to Webster Groves High School. And then we want to set up an intake exit process for kids who are ready to move on back into the regular school setting. Perhaps they might come to morning session and then have afternoon classes in the traditional setting. We can be a little more flexible because it's on our campus. We may be able to step some kids back into the general ed setting if that's appropriate for them. Another piece of this is just our staff professional development. We did some of this in the past, just making sure our speaking of trauma-informed care for our students, it's really critically important. Students had more than, on average, 4 average child experiences. They're about a 50% chance they're going to have either academic or behavioral struggles in school. So we want to make sure we're supporting our students intentionally in that place, as well as some instructional pieces as well. And then middle school coordination. For kids that are in 7th and 8th grade, what answers do we have for students who might need a short-term setting, or then also getting the space prepared for the next school year. So those are some of our steps that are upcoming as we hope to reimagine in a different place and hopefully provide some of the same supports our kids have had, but more locally and more intentionally for our students. Is there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
How will they be invited? Like, I know you kind of briefly went over that, but like students that aren't, I saw a long list, several long lists. So like, how would it be determined that they would benefit from this?
I think we would start with the counselor administrator referral. So we have students that are currently at Vista right now. So we're going to do an exit interview. So as we conclude the exit interview, the administrator will work with Dr. Irving, the coordinator, to decide, is this a student that's eligible for the alternative setting, or would they have been placed right back into the general ed setting? So we'll start with our Vista students, and then schedules are already being made, and some students have already been assigned to Statesman Center, so then those students would be a part of the setting because it's been identified as they created the schedule that they needed to be a part. And then after that, I think we would go our Tuesday meetings where we kind of talk about situations that we have with students. And then in general, counselors, teachers, recommendations. Teachers may know things that we don't know about students, and they should feel free to go to the counselor and say, hey, we may have a candidate that's good for this alternative setting. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we have to also be cautious in that we have a care team that is more counselor, social work driven. We also have our administrative group too. I think we have to be careful not to make that our quick answer, because there's so many things that we can do currently in high school that we want to exhaust those options before we end up barring, something that would require some suddenness perhaps, but an event. But I think we want to be process oriented And I think we want to make sure we get this coordinator in place first and have them be a voice in how we set these systems up. There are different schools that have different programming they use. We look at a lot of those, and what makes the most sense, and who should be in the room, what kind of data is really going to drive our work. I think those are all things we want to be intentional about setting those up.
What kind of credentials would that coordinator have?
Well, I think they would, I think that's probably TBA, but I would say certainly some level of experience in some type of alternative setting.
One of the things that I saw was that you were interested in student interns from Webster, and I think you're talking about counseling students. They have a counseling program. I don't know that they have a social work program, but I've hired some of their counseling interns to work for me, and we have to have their supervisor, so an LCSW or an LPC, on site. So I didn't know if that was something that you needed to consider, that you might want to have someone.
Yeah, it would be similar to what you've experienced. We've got a couple of options in mind. We have a staff member at the high school who is an LCS license, no, LSW. So that individual could do it, but that individual already has a lot on her plate. So we have an option for someone else that we could supervise those interns.
So a student might go to session 1 and then maybe go back to the regular school setting, or would they do session 1 and then session 2 also? Is that a possibility?
I think there's some flexibility in that. I think how we envision it is session 1 would kind of be your core instructional piece, and 1 and 2 allows flexibility for students who might be working in the morning or have childcare responsibilities or whatever it might be, transportation concerns, whatever it might be. They might not be able to come to school until later in the day. And that if they were going to, both would allow students to stack on, let's say, a particular passion they may have for art or music or whatever it might be. They might step into the general ed setting for those particular classes and kind of a la carte that piece of the day to kind of build the best model for them.
Okay. And what is and this may be a Mr. Ellerman cost, or you know this, what the Vista cost now that we're paying?
So our contract for Vista is in that $130,000 range. So that money will just go back into this program. So really there's no cost added with this program.
Okay. And capacity for that area, what do you envision to be like your max capacity before we have to find another place to go?
Well, that would be troubling. I would say, I think we want to house the number of kids we have right now. So I'm thinking the 60 kids, 60 plus, 62 right now that are in Statesman, and then our current kids that are about 18 or so that are currently in Vista. And then depending on how many kids end up there, I'm hoping that kids will want to come there.
Okay. And last question, any thoughts or concerns? I'm just raising this, I don't have any personally, but that entrance near the early childhood area there, have you thought about that, or try to coordinate entrance times and when the youngsters are outside for their playtime?
We've thought about that a little bit, just trying to, some of our scheduling would address that, but we think that my daughter went to KCC when Vista was right across the street, and I think those are, most of the kids are over there right now, currently in those settings, are kids that are there because they've had a struggle or two, and not often, most often not around safety. Fair to say that? Yeah. So we thought about that, and we certainly would want to address that, but certainly want to keep our students who go in the building safe as we do with all our kids.
Yeah, and last as a comment, I think this is good that we're tackling this on our own and not sharing this responsibility with another school district. I think it's good that we keep it in-house, and so thank you for planning this out.
Yes, sir.
Just curious, how often do you reassess those kids to determine whether they should stay there or go back to the regulars? They're like
So in my mind, that's one of the great things about doing it in-house with Vista. Kids were there for the semester. In my mind, if this child, goes to this alternative setting and is showing growth, we could transition them back into a regular classroom before the end of the semester or the end of the term. So it just affords us more flexibility. Dr. Irvin talked about this too. Vista, as good of a program as it was, and for a lot of our kids, it didn't have some of the elective offerings that we have at our high school. We have a lot of great alternative, or a lot of great non-core offerings that kids will now be able to take advantage of.
Great.
One more quick question. What do you mean by the term push in?
The teachers?
Yes, the teachers.
It just means the teacher wouldn't technically be assigned to the alternative setting. They may teach pre-calc first hour in the general education setting, and then go into the alternative setting, 4th hour and teach a class, go back to general ed, 6th hour, and come back 7th hour. They're just in and out. They're not, the teachers won't be, they'll be confined or assigned to that particular space.
I think I have just a different perspective of alternative schools because in my job, it's a place where it is, when I'm involved, it's because kids have had significant behavioral concerns and they simply cannot be in the building, in the regular high school building. And so I don't know, I understand that's not the reason that every kid is there, but that's probably the reason some kids are there or some kids will be there. Concerns about having that on site. The other districts I work with, they tend to not be at the high school building. So if there's conflict between one student and his peers, physically separating them from one another is a benefit. Or do you have any concerns about having kids with significant behavior issues at the high school?
You know, honestly, Amy, I understand that concern.
And maybe I'm just joking. It's entirely possible.
And, you know, there's a small part of me that does have that concern, but, you know, the last several years, we have not had students that really have been at that level. And I did check with Doug to see if he had any concerns. He doesn't think our policy needs to be changed at all. If we have a student who has some type of safe schools violation, our policy is written away where as long as they're not in the regular classes, they can be in this programming. And we'll do some more thinking about, or we'll continue to do thinking about how we can make sure that it's safe for kids in this program and for kids in the rest of the school.
Yeah,
So
I
we-
have the same concern about the preschool.
And then, you know, in terms of separation with the kids, even though this is the spot, right now, there are other places in the high school where we could probably have kids be. And then, you know, we have some options outside of school if we would need to utilize those as well.
Do they go to the cafeteria for lunch, or what? How does that work?
So we've had different, like Chartwell's do a cart and bring it over to the school. Lindbergh Academy was off the main campus. It was not even a door separating the academy from the rest of the school. So they just bought a cart in, kids could buy things off the cart. With with being a 3-hour window of school day as opposed to a longer, and there's maybe less pressure for that, so to speak, but I do think we want to meet their needs, and that certainly can do it that way.
I was just going to say, and we've talked about some of these concerns. We've talked about, you know, there could be, if there's conflict between two kids, maybe one comes in the morning, one comes in the afternoon. We've talked about having some spaces at scope, again, if there's a need to separate or if there's a serious safety concern with the child being in the building. So.
And I just want to say kudos to Dr. Urban and Dr. Yeagans for a long time. This has been a passion of Dr. Yeagans, something that she's put a lot of thought in for multiple years. And then it's Dr. Urban to undertake something of this magnitude in his first year as a principal in high school is pretty proud of.
Well, we found out less than a month ago that, you know, while we had talked about it, we found out less than a month ago that Kirkwood was dissolving Vista and moving it in-house. So all of a sudden, the idea of maybe having a year to develop it turned into, you got a couple months. So, yeah, kudos to both you guys and John for helping them.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Likewise, you're welcome to go wrestle or swim.
Play Xbox or whatever.
Okay. Next up, we have teacher salary structure. Mr. Allman.
Mr. Ellerman was teasing us a little bit today that there was something special with this presentation. I can't
Is that what that's called? It's called a
You were teasing
teaser?
us. You were teasing
Like
us.
that? Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We are pleased to present the recommended teacher salary schedule for our 2019-20 this evening. But first, I would like to ponder a question for a minute. That's not the question. That's the content.
see.
I had it loaded up, but then the
It's a Hawaii.
quick share fell off. You could have been pondering the question all this time.
Most people get artwork when they leave the board. I'm seeing Maui and Hawaii, so
Yeah.
I've,
Sorry about that.
no expectations, but hey.
Okay, so this is the question that I would like to ponder just for a minute. Who wants to be average? So, certainly, we want to think about, okay, when we think about average, would you be satisfied with being average in your personal life, in your career, in your relationships? I think certainly with the outstanding athletes that we had here earlier and seeing the excellence there, they weren't settling for average. I think at our last meeting, Dr. Denboak presented test results, and certainly the district doesn't settle for average when it comes to academics and test scores. But at the same time, I don't believe average is necessarily always the enemy of great, which I hope to illustrate, perhaps memorably, perhaps not, this evening. But first, let's explore context, and that's what the original agenda is for. We'll blow that up just a little bit, maybe be able to see it a little better. So, teacher compensation in Webster Grove School District, and any school district as a matter of fact, as far as that goes, is a big deal. It directly impacts the ability of a school district to attract the best talent, to be offering competitive salaries, attracting the best and the brightest from the work pool to the school district, and also to continue to motivate them, and it has a direct impact on morale, but it also has a direct impact on budget. 60% of the district budget, district operating budget, is for teacher compensation, that's salary and benefits, and that's just teachers. Separate from the support staff. When you throw in support staff and administration, other salaries and benefits, that percentage is closer to about 85%. But just the certified, the teaching staff, about 60% of the budget. Webster is somewhat unusual when it comes to the teacher salary agreement in that there's no formal contract. There's no formal teacher vote on a contract in the district. You hear, particularly this time of the year, in other school districts where teachers in Missouri and perhaps even other states where they're voting on a contract. That doesn't happen in Webster because that's not the process that we have. Our meet and confer process is remarkable and based on trust and a relationship between district and teaching staff. Dr. Wiley heads up that meet and confer process. I work with the lead teacher in terms of salary aspect. Eric Dunn, for the last several years, has kind of taken the lead and shouldered the responsibility for talking numbers and salaries. And so Dr. Wiley and Eric Dunn and myself spent quite a bit of time a few years ago developing a model, and now we spend our time updating that model, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But that the goal of the model, the goal of compensation, was to have a teacher salary schedule that met certain objectives of the school district. And one of those was certainly to be competitive at all areas of the salary schedule. Not just competitive externally, but also from an internal perspective, equitable. And so as we process through that, we set a specific goal to be 105%, to be above that county median. And you can think of the median as average. So in a very real sense, our model and our salary schedule is based on averageness. But it's better than average, so to speak, but it's still at the core is a reference to average. And it's across the entire salary schedule. It's baked into, so to speak, every step on every channel. And we take a look at not just certain sections of the salary schedule each time we sit down, but we look at every step on every channel every time that we sit down each year to revisit the teacher's salary schedule. And as we do that, our objectives, as I mentioned earlier, is trying to be competitive externally, consistently attract and retain the best and the brightest, not just when we need to hire a position, but to keep them here throughout their entire career, attract them in the early years, retain them in the middle, and then sustain that and recognize that in the later parts, because that has a permanent effect in terms of the retirement situation for the staff. We want it to be equitable internally so that as teachers look at how other teachers, as one teacher looks at how other teachers are compensated, we don't have some teachers perhaps compensated higher, relatively higher at certain points of the salary schedule than we do other teachers when certain factors are taken into account, and we're going to talk about those factors, but basically it has to do with educational, professional development, educational attainment, as well as tenure, so to speak, years of experience. We want to make sure that the model is sustainable, that it's predictable and stable and fundable each year, that it's a model that we can look at and project when we look at our finances and our budget. And then we look at the supportability of it. It needs to be supportable, not just by the teachers, because we need the teachers to support the schedule, but also the community, because it's such a large part of the district budget, and the district's financial fortunes are ebb and flow with what happens with teachers, with the teacher's salary schedule for the most part. We update the model annually, and the database includes the salary schedule of every other St. Louis County school district. And so I kind of was thinking like what would illustrate that, and it's not like our salary schedule is in the stratosphere or outer space, but I was looking at this more as like 1,000 points of light. And when you look at the salary schedules out there, most districts have 4 or 5 channels. Bachelor's degree, a master's plus 30, a master's plus more than 30, depending on which district it is, and a PhD. And then generally we'll have about 30 steps on each of those channels. So you look at 30 steps, 5 channels, that's 150 data points for an individual school district, and we're looking at more than 20 school districts in St. Louis County. We have 3,000 data points that we're looking at when we look at this model. And what we do is create a median profile, so to speak, for every channel every channel over the course of a career. And what that looks like, and I'm going to use the master's channel to illustrate, but all of the channels look similar. We start with the years of experience at 1, going out through 35 years, and each point we look at what the median is. That's the blue line, this lower blue line. And then we look at 105% of the median. And actually that's 106% because we want to be at 5% above the county median, but we're basing next year's salary schedule on this year's county salary schedules, and our history has shown that districts generally tend to increase their salary schedules in the past historically by about 1%. So we add that 1% on to the 5% that we want to be above the target, and so that number is essentially 6% above the county median. So if you looked at the distance between the blue line and the purple line here, it's essentially 6% at each step and channel. We don't do that indiscriminately and just automatically do exactly 6%, because we like to kind of smooth the line out a little bit, and not, if the averages jump around a little bit, we try to smooth that out a little bit with the reference point line, so to speak, of our target. And then we superimpose, then compare to that, what is the district's existing salary schedule? And that's represented by essentially the green line, but that's mostly hidden by what the recommended line is, the recommended salary line. Let's see if I can blow this up a little bit so we can see what's happening this year. As we look at the beginning of the salary schedule, you can see a little bit of the green line here. That means that that was our existing salary schedule, the green line, and as you come up to the upper parts of the salary schedule, you can see a little bit of the green up there too. That's this year's 18-19 salary schedule. The orange is next year's recommended salary schedule. So what this is telling us is that the market rose here at the beginning steps and so we needed to push our line up a little bit. It didn't rise in the master's channel in the intermediate steps, but it rose a little bit as we got some of the upper steps, so we pushed this out, and it's smoothing our line. It's smoothing the district's line. We knew we had this legacy super step out there at step 14. It's there at the master's channel. It's there at the master's plus 30 channel. It's there at the master's plus 50 channel, because that's based on Master's plus 30, and it's there in the PhD channel. We'll take a closer look at that in a few minutes. But you can see, as you look at the line and you look at which ones appear to meet the objectives that we were looking at before in the long term, in terms of sustainable, equitable, competitive, those kinds of things. And just from a visual standpoint, which of these lines, which profile is most appealing? Well, it's the median line. It's where would we be if the model was fully implemented and we didn't have the legacy that we were still trying to smooth out, and we wouldn't have these spikes. So the average here, it accomplishes all of those district objectives without overcommitting resources in any particular area, but still remaining competitive across the board. And what I thought was interesting is there's a whole body of research and science about the symmetry of averageness. And it applies not just to perhaps salary schedules like this, but something just as interesting as attractiveness, human facial attractiveness, a whole body of research on this. So you can look at, and I just took the first thing I found on the internet, so don't judge the sample. I just grabbed something to illustrate. And so you take, 5 attractive ladies in their own right. They have to be the same gender and generally the same age. But the research has shown that if you take the human facial features and you average them across the population, that composite is more attractive than any individual. And the interesting thing is that the bigger your sample size from the general population, the more attractive it is. So if you take 5 and average that into a composite, that's a certain level of attractiveness. But if you take 20, that's even more, and 60 is even more. So if you take these 5, and according to the website, and you can Google it if you want, you might have already been aware of this or not, but I happened to check out a movie from the library that had to do with attractiveness and so forth, and that's kind of where I learned about this, and then did a little more research online. And the composite of those results in this. And if you probably is a little bit more comparable when you see them all together. So the 5 becomes the 1. And according at least to the scientific research, that 1 is the most attractive. So if anyone ever describes you as average looking, I suppose you could take that as the highest compliment. That's a real compliment. But from the salary schedule standpoint, when we create that average, we can see where we need to make adjustments, and we could see that from that schedule before, that this is taking a while to catch up. This is the 3rd year of the model, of implementing the model. We see that there's not much progress of eroding this and smoothing the line here where the super step is. We see some at the beginning, what we were looking at. We saw some at the upper levels, and this is similar when we look at the other salary channels, and just using the masters as an example again. But it's going to take an incredible amount of time, because if we look at the last couple of years, it was the same lack of progress over the last couple of years. So it was a large portion of this year's conversation as we were talking about the salary schedule, about what should we do about that. We had hoped that the rising tide would eventually swallow the peaks and fill in the valleys, and it's done a really good job of filling in the valleys, but it's not taking care of the peaks. There had been a peak out here, which on the upper steps, which the district proactively a couple of years ago, when the model was implemented, pulled back on that. But we left the step 14 super step out there for whatever reason, better or worse, on all of the all the salary channels, and that's still hanging out there. So as part of the recommendation, when we talk about the salary schedule itself, is that we want to start addressing that in future years on a year-by-year basis, and we have a specific proposal starting in 2019, 2020-21 to do that. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But at the same time, we also, a principle of the salary negotiations has always been not to have anyone endure a salary cut. So we always talk about grandfathering anyone who is at a current salary that would be higher than what a future salary would be, that those individuals would be grandfathered. We still have some folks grandfathered to the salary schedule 3 years ago, particularly in the bachelor's channel. Our bachelor's channel used to go up to 14 steps and $59,000, almost $60,000. We cut that the first year of this model to 11 steps to try to encourage folks to continue their education and hone their craft and move from the bachelor's column, giving them plenty of time, 11 years, to move over to the master's column and still have that step movement available to them. But to continue to develop and become better teachers, or encourage that professional development and additional education. And so those folks who were previously at some of the higher steps and the higher salaries in that bachelor channel are still grandfathered there, and it's the recommendation that we still continue to grandfather in those cases where it applies.
Bruce, just a reminder, we were trying to avoid, remember the use of that term?
Yes. So hold
keeping
harmless,
people where they are.
Keeping people where they are and holding them harmless.
Thank you.
So going into the 3rd year, the model is working reasonably well. It meets our competitive, equitable, sustainable, supportable, meets all of those goals. It's working better. It's costing less than the old salary schedule. Puts the right amount of dollars in the right place at the right time. And as we get rid of the super steps over time, this model will actually be more competitive and give a sustainable retirement salary that's good for folks in the long term after a career in Webster, while still costing the district about $500,000 less than the super steps that are currently in the middle of a salary schedule that doesn't help us recruiting new teachers because it's in the middle of the schedule, and it doesn't help teachers when they're retiring off the upper steps of the salary schedule. So the legacy alignment progress, it's limited, as we saw by looking at the previous at the master's graph, but I want to take a look at, have you take a look at another comparison of that. So what this shows is over years, and each line represents a particular salary schedule, a salary line. So the blue line down here is our bachelor's line. The green is the master's, the purple is the master's plus 30, and then the orange is the PhD. And what's illustrated here is the difference between what Webster's salary schedule indicates at each step compared to what 105% of the county median is. Where we would like to see that and what our goal is for this to be is that we would have lines that are essentially down here at 1% above the zero mark. This is showing the amount of dollars that we are above at each step here, what 105% of the salary channel is. So when we're looking at, for instance, the master's step here on 14, which is the super step we were looking at on the previous graph, that point is about $7,500 more than what 105% of the current county median is. So that's would take an incredible amount of time. Even if we carved away $1,000 a year at that, it's going to take 7 or 8 years before that is smoothed out on the salary schedule. And that's not a reasonable amount of time. We were hoping to make progress on it. We haven't even been making $1,000 a year progress in moving up to the salary schedule, moving up to that. So we need to be more proactive in doing that. But we wanted to have plenty of notice to the folks that are coming up that would be affected by those changes. So we're recommending for 2021, not the 1920 school year, to begin pulling back on that. And you can see it's mostly step 14. Step 14 for the PhD, step 14 for the master's, step 14 for the master's plus 50 here. We'd already addressed it for the most part on the bachelor's. That super step in the bachelor's is more at step 11. But we've been making progress on the bachelor's side of it, and this is obviously not near as significant as we have in some of these other channels. On the right. So our proposed teacher salary schedule was included with your materials, and what you can see from that is the way that we have presented it. We show this year's what the recommended salary is for each step and channel, and what the current year is. So you can see clearly illustrated here at the bachelor's level. At the early steps, we're adding money as the beginning of the bachelor's, as districts have been adding money to the beginning of their bachelor's column. So you can see we're adding money to the beginning steps of our salary schedule. Here's where you see the money that was added to the master's. And you saw that little green line that was a little below the orange line on that master's. That's represented by those dollars difference. And then we saw at the upper level where there was slight movement, that was these dollar differences. But you can see that the only change between this year's salary schedule for 18-19 and for the 2021, or for the 19-20 salary schedule, is at these early steps, and then also on the PhD side of things, at the very top steps of very top salary channel. So for the most part, our teacher's salary schedule is essentially frozen at what the current year is, and that's based on market data, where our salary is already at the 106% or possibly even in some cases above the 106%. In terms of looking forward, what adjustments would be made to that, we are recommending, and this was included in the written materials that you have, what steps would be adjusted. We're recommending step 14 on the master's column in 2021 be reduced by $2,000. So we take what it currently is and subtract $2,000. That would be the new step 14 starting in 2021. Same thing, but a $1,500 adjustment in step 15. For Masters Plus 30, $2,000 in step 14, $1,500. You can see the adjustments that will be proposed. I also illustrated, and that was something the committee wanted to look at as well, who was going to be affected by those. We're going to have 11 teachers reach step 14 in 2021. So we have 11 teachers this year that are looking at, if they're looking at our current salary schedule and what that step 14 is, they're seeing that salary, and it's going to be $2,000 less under the recommendation from Meet and Confer. But the salary schedule that's in front of you now for your approval is for the 1920 school year. This is an additional consideration so that we can do the appropriate and needed communication with staff so that they can have plenty of advance notice of what these changes are going to be. We have 11 folks who are going to be impacted in 2021, 4 that would be impacted the year after that by the step 14 adjustment, 7 coming up the year after behind them in master. So you can see where the folks are moving up to those points. So that's our recommendation for the salary schedule for this year, and knowing that we'll have that tweak made to the following year. In terms of the projected cost impact of the recommended schedule that is in front of you this evening, the gross impact of that is just slightly over 2%, 2.029. And the net impact 2.197. So we're talking about a 2.2% increase in teachers' salaries net on the budget, and that takes into consideration the estimated retirements that we will have this year and channel changes that we have each year. Teachers seek professional development, additional education, and so they can move over salary lanes and therefore increase their salaries. At the same time, we have retirements where teachers will retire off the top of the salary schedule and we hire in at earlier steps and we save money there. So when we net in the extra cost of the channel changes and the savings from projected retirements, that's where the 2.2% comes from. So very reasonable, I think, compared to what the cost of living has been. As we look out in the future, making reasonable assumptions, the projected increase under the model continues to be in that 2 to 2.5% range for the next even couple of years. So it seems sustainable, it's on target, it's worked for 3 years, very well for 3 years now. It's providing that predictability, stability that we were talking about before, and we're pleased really to recommend that schedule to you this evening. And Sandy, Dr. Wiley, and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thanks to you all and the committee for your hard work. There is a motion, or an action item, if somebody would like to make a motion.
I move that the Board of Education approve the attached 2019-20 teacher salary schedule along with the 4-step process outlined here.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
You can't vote.
Thank you.
And I'll abstain.
Oh, yeah, Christine abstains. Support staff. Structure.
Hello again. So in your materials, hopefully you had an opportunity to take a look at the updated support staff salary structure. The committee met 3 times this year. I'm really happy to report that there weren't really a lot of concerns that they had. They did have some questions that we were able to answer. And so I'm feeling really good about how our support staff are feeling as a group. We did, as we have historically, researched and did a little bit more in-depth research this year with the different categories on the support staff. They're different because you can't look at them as a whole as a teacher, so you have to look at the admin assistant separately from the secretary, and then the secretary different from Sherry's position. So we looked at each individual position, researched what the market was. If there wasn't enough information from districts, because not all districts have every support staff position that we have, then we would look at the market, like look at Indeed or some other places that kind of have some basic research or some basic numbers related to some positions. And we were able to find what we believe were median amounts, the average amount that those positions were paying. There were, if you remember from last year, some positions that were in the red. And so there are some positions that we were not competitive at all. We were either at the bottom or second from the bottom with regard to how we were paying them, specifically custodians, lead custodians, custodial supervisors. So for those positions this year, we did a lot of research in looking at those positions individually and pulling job descriptions and getting more information from districts. The thing with some of these positions is that some of them are outsourced. So you have companies like Sodexo and other places like that. And so trying to get information from them to pull in-house to make comparisons in order for us to make sure that we are very competitive. And so what we came up with was hopefully we have tried this year to bring all of the positions not just at median, but 2.5% above the median so that we were competitive. What we found, which was really good for us, was that some of our support staff positions were already above the median plus 2.5%, which is good. Like in some respects, we were not only meeting the expectation, we were exceeding it. But there are also some positions that we were nowhere near, right? The median, let alone 2.5%. And so what you'll notice in the salary structure is that some positions, the base salary is the same as it was last year. And if that is the case, that's because they were already above our target. Some positions were not. And so we did the work of moving them up to the median plus 2.5%. And then we took a look at where our current employees were paid, and we tried to map out where they should be in reference to them being median plus 2.5%. And so that's why our recommendation for this year for the support staff is all of our support staff, we would recommend for them to receive a 2% increase across the board. So whether or not your position had a base salary that was above the market or not, everybody's receiving a 2%. However, for those positions that were below, we are providing them with 2% plus a little bit of equity to catch them up. So some staff members will receive 2% plus equity when they get their letter of employment, and that will bring all of our categories up to median plus 2.5%, which we're excited to be able to say that from the work that we did 2 years ago to kind of get us out of the mid-max model that we were in to a more equitable system. This overall will cost about 2.7%. It is a little bit higher. However, we believe if we could just get that approved and get that done now, then our work after that for next year will be to work with support staff and take a look at those positions that are way above and what are we processing and thinking through for that for them. And it'll be different because in some of our support staff positions we have one person, right? There's one payroll person or there's one admin assistant to the superintendent, right? And so how do we talk through that and we process that as we're looking toward trying to make the system completely equitable? So again, the points overall of what we're asking you to approve is this updated salary structure. If you will notice in there are a number of different, we've kind of teased some of them out for some positions to be in their own individual categories. Again, wanting to individualize it as best we can so that annually we can continue to look at it and make sure that our base, what we're offering is competitive, not just not just competitive, but we're at least 2.5% above median. I don't know if you have any questions about that.
And we have talked about this, and so this is a 2% raise really for everybody based upon what they're making now.
Yes.
And then how does that play, how are we doing the evaluation where the administrator evaluates them, and are they doing that recommendation? Are we kind of scooting that aside this year?
No, that's still in place. So the administrator will still be the determinant factor as to whether I get the full 2% or not. It is still our recommendation that if you're due equity, that you would receive equity because we're not competitive. However, a person may get 1.5% or 1%. We did provide the administrators with a formula and some information on how to calculate that based on the individual groupings. We have about 4 or 5 different evaluation tools that we provided to them to utilize and given them a formula to determine that.
And staff feels pretty comfortable with that method that the administrators are using?
Yeah, they still want it. They desire it. And one of the positions that they shared was that if I'm working hard and you're not, I just don't think that we should receive the same increase. So they appreciate the fact that the administrators have that autonomy.
Okay. I make a motion the board approve the attached 2019-2020 support staff salary structure.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right.
Nurses, and as you guys remember, a couple of years ago, we removed the nurses from the support staff feature, knowing that their position is a little bit different. I did email the nurses. They really don't have any concerns. Again, kudos to them. I do have a meeting with their part-time lead nurse that her and I will be meeting very shortly to talk through some things for the upcoming year. So I'm excited about the work that she's been doing, but it's pretty much the same recommendation for the nurses. We broke the nurses down by degree. So you have some nurses that just have an RN, but they don't have a BSN. So we have an RN category, BSN, and then a master's for our nurses. And so we pull them all based upon their degree, teased it out. Again, we teased that out for the market as well to determine where we fell in our base. And that'll be the same component as for the support staff, that all nurses will receive a 2% increase, but there are some, for example, the BSN, where we looked at their market and they were a little bit below that 2.5% above the median. So some of our nurses will receive the 2% increase, but they will also receive the equity to kind of catch them up. We're very happy that we're very competitive from what we saw versus where we were a couple of years ago. That'll be pretty much the same structure that we have for the nurses, similar to support staff, and that we want to provide everyone with a 2% increase, and that we have moved all of their bases up to 2.5% above median. And so those nurses that are due equity will receive the equity in addition to 2%, but not all of them will, because some of them are currently above that median mark, plus 2.5%.
This kind of goes to the support staff. Do you see a difference in the quality of applicants based upon the change in the salary structure?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Make a motion, we approve the 2019-2020 nurses salary schedule.
Thank you. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Dr. Simpson, I believe you are up.
I wanted to revisit a conversation. Keita and I spoke recently, and I've spoken with Amy and David too. We've talked about in the past doing some development together around equity. Obviously, an equitable environment is something that we're aspiring to. It's what good teaching and learning is. It's what good environments are. And so through some conversations, I spoke with Amy and David, and just had the recommendation of why don't we find out what other options are out there, what kind of development's available. So I contacted Education Equity Consultants. That's the group that does our second year development for all of our second year teachers, and asked Tony Neal just to provide me with some different information related to what they would do. He says that they've done something similar with boards of education in the past. Before I explain what it is, we also talked about, is it something that we want to do, you want to do as just a school board? Or is it something where we want to expand the circle a little bit and invite other city leaders in, other councils, aldermen from around the area, alder people from around the area? Or is it something that you want to invite other school boards to participate in? He gave me a bid, and the economics of it didn't change based on either 8 participants or 25 participants. He designed it. Of course, they're flexible. If you want an hour, they'll give you an hour. If you want 2 hours, they'll give you 2 hours. He designed a program that would be a total of 8 hours, either 2 4-hour segments or 4 2-hour segments. Certainly something that could be spaced out over next year or start with the summer next year. Focus of these retreats has been to assist school board members in both a personal and professional examination of changes that will lead to equity within the learning environments of students. During the retreat, participants will examine both individual and institutional practices and behaviors, both conscious and unconscious, which hold impressions in place within a school setting and further inhibits the creation of a culturally responsive school system. So, just kind of wanted to see what the board is interested in. I'm happy to get other proposals. I'm happy to reach out to school boards or the council, but just kind of want to see where everybody was with this idea of doing this development.
I feel like this is very important work, and I've mentioned it to the board before. I like the idea of us doing it in whatever way is best. I'm not opposed to inviting other city leaders. We have, 3 or 4 different cities that is within the 63109, and our school's 5. I don't want to wait for them to say yes. You know what I've seen from them recently. I thought we could maybe lead by example.
Zach's trying to schedule to fit everybody's. If we can get a date that works for us, and
Does he have a systemic racism section or component, or is it just mainly educational, learning related, or?
I think it's mainly, it's looking at institutions.
Okay. Because I'm thinking city council folks may like, well, you know, that's educational.
Thank you.
How's it? Because I think it'd be great to invite all 5 mayors and city councils and allow them to participate in that. As long as they find that they can get a benefit from it.
Right.
And not just, it's all educational.
Yeah.
If you open it up and said, if at least 3 of each one, and I'm not sure you'll get 3 from each one, but that would be 15 people plus the 7 of you to be you'd only be about 22 people there out of the 25 that, 8 to 25 that you had mentioned earlier in your presentation, Jim. So, I mean, they may even say, well, we'd like to send 1 or 2 people.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the cost?
Cost is approximately $3,800 for 2 facilitators. I'd be happy to work with, Amy and David, maybe reaching out to you guys to decide, how do we want to, what kind of chunks do we want to do this? How much do we want to space this? Because I'm also mindful of your careers and lives are also busy. So, want to do that? Does that sound okay to you all?
Yeah, I think a question for them might be, like, is there intentional space between sessions for reflection, or is there homework that we're doing between sessions that might help inform that discussion?
Okay.
And I'm assuming there would be some sort of anti-bias training in there, so some sort.
Yeah.
I would love to see.
Yeah. It's talking about, class, race, gender, ethnicity, so it's not just race. I think it's bias and racism and all its forms. I could tell them. That's what, be more specific with that. Okay. And I think, Joe, we'll do your idea, try and find a time when all board members can be present and then invite people.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We now have our second opportunity for public comment. Alice, Debbie, was it? You're just gonna wait. Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I make a motion that we approve consent agenda items 8.02, 8.03, 8.04, 8.05.
Second. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Further move that we recess back into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel.
Second. All those in favor, roll call please.
Mr. Lord?
Yes.
Keller?
Yes.
Ms. Bell?
Yes.
Ms. Clendenin?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn?
Yes.
Mr. Service?
Yes. Sandy's gonna stick around.